The rhythmic pounding of construction equipment shattered the morning quiet as Sam Whitaker stood at the edge of his property line. At 62, his weathered hands gripped the worn fence post, the same one his father had installed half a century earlier. From this vantage point, he could see all 40 acres that had been in his family for nearly a century. Or rather, he could see what remained unclaimed of it. Bulldozers and cement mixers crawled across the eastern section of his land like mechanical insects, transforming the once open meadows where he'd played as a child into foundations for cookie-cutter homes. The Willow Creek Village development, 120 units of luxury modern living, was rising on soil that had nurtured 3 generations of Whitakers. They really thought they could just take it, Sam muttered, his voice barely audible above the construction noise. A hint of a smile, not of amusement but of quiet confidence, played at the corners of his mouth. Behind him, the original farmhouse stood as the last physical reminder of his family's legacy. The white 2-story structure with its wraparound porch had hosted community gatherings, family reunions, and quiet Sunday afternoons for decades. Now it stood as a solitary island in a sea of construction. 6 months earlier, the Willow Creek Homeowners Association had moved forward with their ambitious expansion plan, dismissing Sam's objections with legal maneuvering and procedural technicalities. Led by Marge Ellison, the HOA had leveraged their connections at City Hall to push the development through despite Sam's documentation proving his ownership. "Your claims are outdated, Mr. Whitaker," Marge had announced during the heated community meeting last fall. "The zoning board has approved our plans, and Willow Creek deserves to grow into the premier community we all envision." What Marge and her board didn't know, what none of them had bothered to investigate thoroughly, was that Sam had spent years preparing for this exact scenario. The seemingly simple carpenter had laid groundwork so thorough, so legally binding, that it would soon send shockwaves through the entire development. "Phase 1 complete," Sam whispered as he watched workers installing windows in the model home. The first 40 houses were already sold, with families scheduled to move in within weeks. Another 80 were in various stages of construction, with deposits paid and contracts signed. The stakes couldn't be higher. Millions of dollars invested, dozens of families preparing to move, and Marge Ellison's reputation as a visionary community leader. All of it built quite literally on Sam's land. And all of it about to face a reckoning that no one saw coming. As Sam turned to walk back to his house, his phone buzzed with a message from his attorney, documents filed. "Clock starts now." The trap, carefully designed, perfectly legal, and potentially devastating to the HOA's finances, had been set in motion. Have you ever wondered what rights you truly have when powerful local organizations set their sights on your property? What would you do if you found yourself in Sam's position, watching others build on land that's been in your family for generations? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know if you've ever faced down an HOA or local authority that overstepped its bounds. This story might just give you some ideas worth remembering. The 40-acre property meant everything to Sam Whitaker. Every tree, every slope, every inch of soil told a story that connected him to his past. His grandfather, Thomas Whitaker, had purchased the land in 1927 with savings from his railroad job, determined to build a place where his children could grow up with fresh air and open skies. During the Depression, when neighboring farms foreclosed, Thomas had kept the land by working double shifts and turning part of their acreage into a community garden that fed dozens of local families. Dad always said Grandpa's hands were permanently stained with soil, Sam often told visitors, displaying the old tools still hanging in the barn. Not from the work, but from the giving. Sam's father, James, had expanded the family's connection to the community, hosting summer festivals where neighbors gathered under oak trees to share food and music. The eastern meadow, now covered with foundation concrete, had once held 3-legged races and horseshoe tournaments. James and his wife Eleanor had taught Sam that land wasn't just property. It was a responsibility to maintain something valuable for those who would come after. "Your grandfather didn't buy this land," James had told a teenage Sam while they repaired fencing together. "He borrowed it from you and your future children." Now, in his workshop adjacent to the main house, Sam ran his hand along a cedar chest he'd crafted for his wife Judith for their 30th anniversary. Their 35-year marriage had weathered many challenges, but Judith's support remained unwavering. A retired librarian, whose mind stored both academic knowledge and practical wisdom, she had been the first person with whom Sam had shared his concerns about the HOA's intentions. "They're not just after the open land," he'd explained 5 years earlier as they sat on their porch watching birds at the feeder. "They want all of it, including the house." "Then we'll need to be smarter than they are," Judith had replied, setting aside her book. The next day, she'd brought home property records dating back to the 1920s, laying the foundation for what would become their methodical defense. Their children had inherited this blend of principle and pragmatism. Emily, a compassionate nurse in Chicago, had absorbed her grandmother Eleanor's belief in community care. Though her medical career had taken her to the city, she returned monthly, bringing her professional perspective to their family discussions. Ben, who taught history at Willow Creek High School, lived just 20 minutes away and had incorporated local land use conflicts into his curriculum, helping a new generation understand the importance of preserving community heritage. History isn't just dates and famous people, Ben often said, echoing his father's philosophy. It's about respecting what came before while building something better for tomorrow. The family had watched with increasing concern as the HOA expanded its influence throughout Willow Creek. When neighboring properties began selling to developers, Sam recognized the pattern. Without telling even Judith initially, he started meeting with attorneys who specialized in property law and environmental protection. These quiet preparations accelerated when Sam discovered survey markers on his eastern boundary 3 years ago. Though the HOA claimed it was merely updating records, Sam understood the true implications. That night, he'd driven to meet with Harold Benson, his father's old friend and a retired judge. "They're coming for it all, Harold," Sam had explained in the judge's bookline study. "I need something stronger than just ownership papers." "What you need," Harold had replied, pulling out a legal pad, "is a strategy they won't see coming until it's too late." Over the next 18 months, Sam assembled a comprehensive legal framework, a combination of environmental easements, historical preservation designations, and financial mechanisms designed to activate only if construction began on his property without permission. Each component was filed separately in different counties, creating a dispersed but interconnected system of protections. When Judith discovered what he'd been doing, she'd added her librarian's touch, creating an organizational system that ensured not a single document could be overlooked. "If they want to take our legacy," she'd said, "they'll have to get past our planning first." Marge Ellison stood before the gleaming wall-sized map of Willow Creek in the HOA headquarters, her manicured fingernail tracing the planned expansion routes. At 54, the former corporate executive had transformed the once modest homeowners association into what she proudly called a model of modern community management. Phase 3 will establish Willow Creek as the premier residential destination in the county, she explained to the assembled board members. The digital display highlighted the Whitaker property in glowing red. Once completed, property values will increase by an estimated 28% across all neighborhoods. Marge had arrived in Willow Creek 5 years earlier after a decorated career in real estate development. The quiet suburb had initially been her retreat from urban pressure, but she quickly recognized its untapped potential. Within 6 months, she had won the HOA presidency on a platform of modernization and growth. "We're not just building houses," she often declared at community meetings. "We're creating the future." Her development strategy had 3 components: acquire key properties, change zoning regulations, and construct rapidly. The board had already transformed several older neighborhoods into luxury communities, but the Whitaker land represented the crown jewel: 40 acres of prime real estate with scenic views and road access. "The easement claims are outdated," explained Jeffrey Morton, the HOA's attorney, during a closed session 3 months before construction began. "Our research shows the original property boundaries were modified in 1978, and the eastern section falls under the township's right-of-way provisions." This creative interpretation of property law had been enough for most board members to approve moving forward, despite the thin evidence. The documents Jeffrey presented were technical enough to confuse the average homeowner, filled with legal terminology that obscured their questionable validity. Not everyone on the board aligned with Marge's aggressive approach. Priya Desai, a 38-year-old attorney specializing in property law, had voiced concerns during private meetings. "These ownership documents Whitaker provided seem legitimate," Priya had noted, examining Sam's submission with professional scrutiny. "We should at least delay construction until we've verified the boundary claims." Marge had dismissed her concerns with practiced corporate efficiency. "The Planning Commission has already approved our permits. Delays cost money, Priya." Elliot Grayson, the retired military officer who served as the board's compliance director, sided predictably with Marge. His rigid adherence to protocol made him a valuable ally when Marge needed procedural support. "The bylaws are clear," Elliot stated whenever challenged. "Section 12.4 gives the board authority to proceed with community improvement projects once permits are secured." The fact that Elliot's interpretation conveniently ignored other bylaws protecting established property rights went unmentioned. When Sam Whitaker had appeared at a board meeting with a folder of historical deeds and ownership papers, Marge had handled him with the practiced patience of someone dealing with an obstacle rather than a person. "Mr. Whitaker, your family's contributions to Willow Creek are noted and appreciated," she had said, her tone professionally sympathetic yet dismissive. "However, modern development requires modern solutions. The board has reviewed your claims and found them insufficient to halt progress." What she didn't share publicly was her conversation with the mayor 2 days earlier, where she'd emphasized the tax revenue the new development would generate. or the expedited permit approvals that followed generous HOA donations to the re-election campaigns of key officials. By the time ground broke on the first model home, Marge had effectively neutralized all official channels through which Sam might object. Construction proceeded at a remarkable pace, a strategy designed to create an overwhelming sense of inevitability. Once families move in, she had explained to the board, no judge will rule to demolish existing homes, regardless of previous ownership claims. If you were in Sam's position, watching an organization systematically take your family land while dismissing your legal claims, what would you do? Would you fight like Sam, or would you pursue a different strategy? Like this video and share your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have planned a countermove years in advance, or would you have taken a different approach to protect your legacy? As news of the development dispute spread through Willow Creek, residents found themselves choosing sides. The community that had once gathered for shared holidays and block parties now fractured along lines of progress versus preservation. Carlos Rivera, known throughout the neighborhood for his handyman skills and generous spirit, found himself becoming an unofficial mediator. The 45-year-old widower hosted impromptu gatherings at his modest home, where neighbors from both factions could voice concerns over his famous homemade empanadas. My father taught me that communities are built on respect, not just rules, Carlos explained one evening as a heated discussion about property rights cooled under his diplomatic guidance. As a single dad raising 2 children while juggling multiple jobs, Carlos understood the practical value of development. New opportunities for work, better schools from increased tax revenue. Yet he also cherished the neighborhood's character that had welcomed his family 15 years earlier. Progress doesn't have to erase history, he often said. We can build new homes without bulldozing the community's heart. David and Mark Thompson, who lived 3 streets from the disputed property, brought a different perspective. The couple, David a software engineer and Mark a high school art teacher, had moved to Willow Creek seeking both modern amenities and small-town warmth. We support thoughtful development, David explained during a community forum. But what's happening on the Whitaker land feels rushed and dismissive of legitimate concerns. Mark, who had incorporated local architecture into his teaching curriculum, added, communities evolve, but they should carry forward elements of their past. This isn't evolution, it's replacement. The couple had organized a digital archive documenting Willow Creek's architectural heritage, inadvertently creating evidence that would later prove valuable in understanding the legal boundaries of various properties. Rachel Kim found herself in a particularly difficult position. As a promising real estate agent and single mother, the 29-year-old had already sold 6 units in the new development, with commissions that would finally allow her to move her 7-year-old son, Ethan, from their small apartment to a house with a yard. I believe in what these new homes can offer families like mine, she confided to Carlos during a quiet moment. But if they're built on wrongfully acquired land, she left the sentence unfinished, her professional opportunity now clouded by ethical concerns. No resident provided more historical context than Linda Harper. At 72, the retired teacher had witnessed Willow Creek's transformation across decades. Her meticulously maintained records included photographs of community events held on the Whitaker property, dating back to the 1950s. That eastern meadow hosted our Independence Day celebrations for over 30 years, she explained to younger residents, pointing to faded photographs. The boundary line has always run along Cedar Creek, regardless of what new maps might claim. As construction continued, residents displayed yard signs declaring allegiance. Progress for Willow Creek competing with respect property rights. Neighborhood cookouts became uncomfortable when both factions attended. Long-standing friendships frayed under the pressure of choosing sides. The division crystallized during the Spring Festival, traditionally held in the community park. For the first time in memory, 2 separate events were planned, one organized by the HOA at the new development's model home, another by longtime residents at the original park pavilion. The community that had once prided itself on unity now stood divided, waiting to see how the conflict between Sam Whitaker and the HOA would resolve. The Willow Creek Community Center hummed with tension on a Tuesday evening in May. The quarterly HOA meeting had drawn unprecedented attendance, every chair filled, with residents lining the walls and spilling into the hallway. At the front table, Marge Ellison arranged her presentation materials with methodical precision, occasionally glancing at the crowd with practiced confidence. I'll now open the floor for the community comment period, she announced after presenting glowing reports about the development's progress. Please keep remarks to 2 minutes. Sam Whitaker rose from his seat in the front row, a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. Unlike previous meetings where he'd appeared resigned, tonight he moved with calm determination. I appreciate the board making time for this matter, Sam began, his voice steady as he placed several documents on the presentation table. These are the original land surveys from 1927, 1956, and 1984, all confirming the eastern boundary of my property extends to Cedar Creek. He methodically laid out additional papers, tax records, utility easements, and maintenance agreements spanning decades. Note that each document has been certified by the county recorder, Sam continued. They consistently show my family has maintained ownership and paid taxes on all 40 acres for 96 years. Marge's smile remained fixed, but her fingers tightened around her pen. Mr. Whitaker, we've reviewed similar materials before. The board is already determined. I'm not finished, Sam interrupted, his firm tone surprising the room. He produced a folder marked with the County Water Authority's seal. This environmental impact study from 2018 explicitly references the Whitaker property boundary at Cedar Creek as the natural watershed division for the entire township. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Priya Desai leaned forward, her legal training recognizing the significance of this document that had never been presented before. Furthermore, Sam continued, I've provided copies of correspondence between my attorney and the County Planning Commission dating back 5 years, clearly establishing our objections to any development beyond this boundary line. Elliot Grayson cleared his throat. The permits have been approved, construction is underway, and homes have already been sold. These historical documents, while interesting, don't supersede current zoning approvals. With respect, Mr. Grayson, Sam replied, zoning approvals based on incorrect property boundaries are inherently invalid. From the middle of the room, Carlos Rivera stood. I've worked on homes throughout this community for 15 years. Every local contractor knows that land belongs to the Whitakers. We've respected that boundary on every project. Others joined in, Linda Harper with her historical records, the Thompsons with architectural documentation, even Rachel Kim reluctantly confirming that property records she'd researched showed discrepancies with the HOA's claims. As voices rose, Marge rapped her gavel sharply. That's quite enough. The board has made its determination based on comprehensive legal review. The development continues as planned. Sam calmly collected his documents. Before I go, there's one thing you should know. He placed a final paper on the table. This notice was filed with the county recorder yesterday. Priya picked it up, her expression shifting as she read. She leaned toward Marge, whispering urgently. Marge's confident facade cracked slightly. This meeting is adjourned, she announced abruptly. As board members huddled in concerned conversation, residents approached Sam, their questions revealing a community no longer willing to accept the HOA's decisions without challenge. 2 days after the confrontation at the community center, an emergency HOA board meeting convened behind closed doors. Jeffrey Morton, the association's attorney, spread documents across the conference table, his usual confidence replaced by visible concern. It's not just one thing, he explained as Marge and the board members examined the papers. Whitaker created a multi-layered legal framework that activated when we broke ground on his property. The attorney pointed to the first document. He established a conservation easement on the eastern section 15 years ago, registered with 3 different environmental trusts. That alone makes our construction technically illegal. Priya Desai, examining the paperwork with professional appreciation, nodded. And the historical designation filed with the State Preservation Office creates another layer of protection. Those we might fight in court, Jeffrey admitted. But this is the real problem. He held up a thick legal agreement. Whitaker created a conditional trust fund with a starting value of $1.2 million, designed to enforce the easements. The moment our bulldozers crossed his property line, it activated. Elliot Grayson removed his glasses. What exactly does that mean? It means, Jeffrey explained, that every day construction continues, financial penalties accumulate. The trust has already filed injunctions in 3 jurisdictions. We're looking at potential damages exceeding $5 million if we don't resolve this immediately. Marge's face paled. Can we challenge it? The documentation is flawless. Priya interjected before Jeffrey could respond. Sam had this reviewed by environmental attorneys, property law specialists, and even constitutional scholars. He's been preparing this for years. Outside the HOA office, word spread quickly. Carlos Rivera organized an impromptu gathering at the community park where Sam explained his strategy to fascinated neighbors. My grandfather always said, prepare for rain on a sunny day, Sam told them. When I noticed the HOA purchasing properties surrounding mine and changing zoning maps, I knew what was coming. The elaborate legal mechanism Sam had constructed wasn't just clever, it was virtually bulletproof. The conservation easement protected native plant species documented by university researchers. The historical designation preserved areas where documented community events had occurred for decades. And the trust fund, established with inheritance money from his parents, provided the financial teeth to enforce everything else. I didn't want to trigger any of this, Sam explained. I approached the HOA repeatedly over 5 years, trying to work out a compromise. Linda Harper confirmed this with her meticulous records of community meetings. The Thompsons shared digital archives showing the consistent boundary markers. Even Rachel Kim acknowledged the HOA had dismissed valid concerns. Within a week, the consequences became visible. Construction equipment disappeared from the eastern section of the property. Sold signs on unfinished homes were removed. The HOA issued a carefully worded statement about reassessing development boundaries pending legal review. For residents of completed homes in the development, uncertainty loomed. Would their properties be deemed invalid? Would the HOA face bankruptcy from legal penalties, leaving the community without services? The resolution came in the form of compromise. Rather than engaging in protracted legal battles, the HOA negotiated with Sam to legally purchase a smaller portion of his land at fair market value, redesign the development to respect historical areas, and establish a community trust to preserve the rest as green space for public use. Sam's trap hadn't destroyed the HOA. It had forced them to do what they should have done from the beginning: respect property rights and include the community in development decisions. Have you ever faced someone who underestimated your preparation and planning? This story shows how knowledge and foresight can protect what matters most to you. If you found value in Sam's strategic approach to defending his rights, subscribe now for more stories about everyday people using legal knowledge to stand up against powerful organizations. Share in the comments how you would have handled this situation. Would you have fought like Sam or taken a different approach? And don't forget to follow our channel for weekly content that helps you understand your rights and how to protect them.